Joining us now, Liz Peek. You can follow Liz Peek on Twitter at Liz Peek. You can read her in The Hill and also on Fox News and all that good stuff. Liz Peek, good to have you with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
What do you think of this government shutdown?
Oh, I think it's a political grandstanding play by Democrats who have absolutely no agenda and no message to take to American voters. So this is a way for a lot of them to posture and get their name in print and get their little airtime on TV. But it really does nothing for the country. And in fact, most Americans, according to polls, don't think that the government should be shut down over the fate of the Dreamers. And particularly, I think, John, you can editorialize here and say that's particularly the case when all parties have indicated a willingness to keep these so-called Dreamers in the country. This is not, Democrat messaging is now out there with sort of false alarms about deportations. No one's talking deportation. That is a myth. And so, look, I mean, the fastest-growing demographic in the country is Hispanics. Democrats have got their teeth into the Hispanic vote, and Obama really kind of failed Hispanics. They didn't get any kind of immigration fix, even when they had a solid Democrat majority in Congress for 2 years. Instead, they went ahead and did Obamacare. So coming up to the 2012 election, Obama saw his standing with that Latino community begin to fall apart. And so he rushed in this DACA, which everyone knew at the time, and he even admitted was probably illegal. So, all the messaging about this from the Democrats has been false. It is a false statement that Trump did away with DACA. What he did was give Congress 6 months to fix it because he knew the courts were about to rule in an unfavorable way about the program, which would throw it into even worse jeopardy and sort of haphazardness. So, I mean, it's a really baloney issue, and Chuck Schumer is just playing it for all he can because his base, and let's face it, this is the extreme part of the Democratic Party, wants nothing more than just to oppose Donald Trump and make him look bad. That is their sole agenda.
Well, and they don't have a plan for the future other than to get more Democratic voters. And, I said this earlier, Liz, and I'm going to say it again. I want to get your opinion on it. Along with the spending continuation to February 8th that the House of Representatives passed the other day, included in that is continued funding for 72 months for CHIP recipients. Now, the Republicans have ran around, the Democrats have ran around saying, Republicans don't want to extend CHIP. They don't want to, the program is going to sunset. They haven't done anything about it. Well, the Republicans in this bill, knowing it was going to sunset, funded it for the next 72 months, which is more than the Democrats even wanted. But here's the rub, okay? And you nailed it. The DACA enthusiasts and those that were brought here illegally and the Hispanic coalition that goes with that, this is the base now of the Democrats' message, of the Democrats, all right? And they want them motivated going into November. They want their votes, legally or illegally, and they're willing to put the CHIP kids in jeopardy. You know why? Because those 9 million children, their parents, they represent Trump voters. That's Trump's core right there. Working families that don't make enough money to buy their own insurance, but make too much money so they can't qualify for Obamacare subsidies or Medicaid handouts. This is Trump's core vote base that they're basically kicking to the curb. Am I right?
I mean, it's interesting because really people haven't raised that. You're the first person I've heard actually talk about that. Look, all of this is sort of phony baloney posturing, and I hope we get through it. I actually, John, I'll share with you my conspiracy theory of the morning, which is in the back of my head. I'm thinking, wow, isn't this convenient that when these 5 months of missing texts from people in the FBI who were trying to subvert the Trump presidency is made public, that those texts are missing, all of it, it's in the midst of a government shutdown where all the attention is elsewhere. I think it's very, very handy for the Democrats that this came along because this whole issue of release the memo and bad behavior on the part of senior FBI officials and Justice Department under Obama, this is coming to a head. And in a way, what Schumer's doing is a very clever thing to take all the attention elsewhere so that Americans really aren't paying attention to it, because to me, that is the big story of the day.
It is a big story of the day, so elaborate on that. You think that the Democrats are engaging in this government shutdown in order for that to wane in the news?
I doubt it, but I have to say it's awfully convenient for them, and to the extent that a lot of Democrat strategists are suggesting this is not a good place for Democrats to be, that this shutdown is not going to work in their favor because, again, the polling shows, yes, people want the Dreamers, but they don't think the government should be shut down over this. Playing the blame game, who knows who's going to really end up being scarred by this. But as I say, I think the Democrats might have come to the table and just passed a spending bill with some sort of agreement with the Republicans. Next up is immigration, as I think, was it Cotton who was talking about that, or Rand Paul before? But, meanwhile, this is some pretty bad stuff that's coming out, I think, about the FBI, and Democrats have to be incredibly pleased it's not the number one headline.
Well, they do. So where do we go, Liz? You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with columnist Liz Peek. You can follow her on Twitter at Liz Peek. She also is a contributor to The Hill. Go to thehill.com. By the way, I'm an avid reader of The Hill. It is my number one source for honest news coming out of Washington. It's pretty biased, but it's not as bad as some of the others.
Well,
now,
they published me, so
I know it's
to their credit, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you really want a rundown Washington, D.C. in the morning, just to find out like all the ins and outs without all the bias, all right? Like you can't go to Politico. It's just ridiculous. But The Hill, in my judgment, that's where I go. I mean, that's where I get a lot of my information. So I would do that. I would recommend that. Plus, you can read Liz Peek there. So, Liz, I mean, who's going to blink here, Liz?
Well, my guess is that the fix is that they will agree on a spending bill and also agree to take up immigration in the next week and have it be a wide-ranging conversation. See, I'm not sure that the Democrats really want that because their position on border enforcement has become so extreme now, that is to say, so completely lax, that I think Americans are going to be kind of shocked. This is something the polling shows, and I hate to always talk about the polls, but it's kind of important politically since this is a political maneuver to remember Americans, yes, approve of legal immigration. They're not so keen on illegal immigration, and they really want border security. And that is something that Democrats have just walked away from. Look what's happening in California, where private enterprises now are not even allowed to help or to agree with ICE to give them information about their employees. It's pretty unbelievable. So California is sort of in the lead here, allowing anybody and everybody to come into that state and take up residence, get driver's licenses, get law licenses, which is pretty shocking to me, and in some cases vote in local elections. That is becoming a lawless state, in my view. So they want that as the model for the country, and I don't think Americans are going to put up with it.
Well, they want that for the model of the USA because California is now a reliable blue state that votes Democratic 100% of the time. It'll never go Republican again. It's impossible until finally the thing financially implodes. And that's what's going to eventually happen.
Many cities out there have declared bankruptcy because, in fact, the financial model isn't working.
Of course it's not working. But you're right. When you look at what California has done, and the real move they did was just the other day where after getting your driver's license, which, by the way, you don't have to prove that you're a legal resident of the United States. You just go in and they never ask a question. As long as you can pass the test, you're going to get a DL and a photo ID. Now what they're saying is, along with that, you're automatically enrolled to vote. You don't have to do anything. You're automatic, which means you don't have to check that little box on the voter registration form that says, I am a legal resident of the United States. I'm a citizen. You don't have to check that box, which means you can't be convicted in the future of a felony, which is lying on the form and participating. All right, that's all gone. So basically what they're saying is if you're in the state, whether you're a legal resident or a citizen or not, you're allowed to vote, right? That's de facto what they're saying, isn't it?
Well, they're certainly making it very, very easy. And, you know, I think Americans really aren't tolerant of that. I mean, in California now, about 6% of the people in the state are illegal immigrants. And, you know, they're doing things like giving those people scholarships to California state universities. So imagine if you're a legal resident in California and your kid doesn't get a scholarship and someone else does who's not even a citizen of the country. I really do think at some point you reach a breaking point where people say, no, enough, this does not make sense. You know, this is not working. These people don't pay income taxes, et cetera. I think it's a problem.
Well,
but it's a really bigger problem if you try and roll it out to the whole country. I mean, let California do what they want, but this isn't going to work for the U.S., and that's what this argument is about.
Liz, look, the bottom line here, and you nailed it when you first came on, the Democrats don't want this debate in public, right?
Mm-hmm, they sure
This
don't.
is the last thing they want. So they'd rather have a gang of six behind closed doors, Lindsey Graham working out amnesty and watered down security. They don't want this debate out in the open. And what in the montage we had, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul basically said, hey, why don't we just debate this thing in the open, let all the amendments flow, work it out in public with complete transparency. You agree with me, right? That is the Democrats' worst nightmare, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's the right thing to do because, you know, there's been a lot of squawking about regular order and getting Senate back to the regular order. Let's see that happen. I mean, let's see how it works. Maybe it doesn't work anymore, John. That's what we're really going to find out. But, no, I think that's exactly right. And, look, I think these congressmen on both sides, frankly, spend too much time hiding behind all these walls that are put up to shield these conversations from the public. I think on this issue, this is a big political issue in the United States. I think it's good to have people know where people stand.
No question. Let's get to the other issue here, which is the ridiculous man-made Senate rule of 60-vote cloture. The president, Liz Peek, over the weekend saying in a tweet, saying, look, why don't we just end the 60-vote cloture rule and go to 50% plus one, invoke the nuclear option, and see what happens. McConnell said, no, we can't do that. Why?
Well, I think that the traditionalists in the Senate want to keep it as a cautious, deliberative body, and I think by the 60-vote rule, it means that most things that pass have to have bipartisan support, and I think that actually has some value. In other words, let's suppose that next up you get a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president. Do you really want a simple majority to rule on all kinds of things, including taxes and immigration? No, I don't think we do. So, I'm sympathetic for right now. That would be a very positive thing for Republicans to get more things done, an infrastructure bill, an immigration bill, et cetera. But by the way, let's go back to something else that we didn't really touch on. There is no question that the other thing that Democrats are absolutely horrified about is the fact that Donald Trump would be president when we actually get an immigration reform package that makes sense to most Americans. This is something that has eluded 4 presidents prior to this one, and this is the one that everybody calls racist. Imagine the Rose Garden ceremony where Trump is signing an immigration bill that most of the country agrees with. That would so undercut the Democrat narrative about who Donald Trump is and who the Republican Party is. They can't let that happen. So there's all kinds of political reasons why Rand Paul's very intelligent suggestion may not go anywhere, but that's probably the number one.
So the bottom line is they don't want immigration reform to succeed.
Absolutely not. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. There was an article in, Politico or someplace about how we have to have, in the New York Times, we should have empathy with the other side. Pretend you're Chuck Schumer. Can you imagine allowing that to happen? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. It in one fell swoop, it takes all that energy of Hispanic activism off the charts for, as you point out, this year and also 2020. I mean, I just don't think they can let it happen.
I don't either. I think that's part of the issue. That's why they don't want the transparency. They don't want the vote. And they just want the Republicans to cave so they can say, look, we made the Republicans go ahead and give amnesty to DACA recipients. And to me, when they say, well, the president isn't negotiating in good faith, the president campaigned on not giving DACA applicants amnesty. All right. That was one of his campaign promises. Now, he said he's willing to go back on that if he gets three simple things. And they're very simple. Real border security, including money for the wall, which he campaigned on from day one, getting rid of the visa lottery program that makes no sense to anybody whatsoever,
right,
and ending this ridiculous chain migration and going to a merit-based system so people that come in have the economic ability to work, support themselves, and contribute to the economy and fulfill an economic need that we have. On the surface, that looks completely plausible. And what he said is, I'm then willing to give amnesty. And he can call it whatever he wants, it is amnesty, to those 800,000 and maybe even expand that. That's called negotiation. You get things and you give up things.
That's exactly right. And that deal's been on the table. Look, all you need to know, seriously, John, is that deal was basically on the table and moving along when Dick Durbin stormed out and repeated Donald Trump's comments about the blank hole nations and got everybody so aroused that they couldn't possibly go back to the negotiating table. Why did Durbin do that? Because they don't really want a deal.
I agree. 100%. You're spot on. We're out of time. Well, I want to thank Liz Peek for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you on. Liz, spot on. You can read Liz Peek. Go to The Hill, and you can also follow her on Twitter at Liz Peek. Liz, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Have a good day.
All right, you have one too. John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth. We'll be right back.